Good day, everyone. My name is Tayo Rosauro F. Dulay, and today I'll be presenting my topic in our subject, MIT 506 Enterprise Architectures. And my topic for today is Information System Security and Privacy. And now let's proceed with our learning objectives. So for our learning objectives, we have to identify the information triad. Next is to identify and understand the high-level concepts surrounding information security tools. Next is to secure yourself digitally. For our introduction, as computers and other digital devices have become essential to business and commerce, they have also increasingly become a target for attacks. So for a company or an individual to use a computing device with confidence, they must first be assured that the device is not compromised in any way, that all communications will be secure. So in this discussion, we will review the fundamental concepts of information system security and discuss some of the measures that can be taken to mitigate security threats. Now let's proceed with the figure of the information triad. So here is the figure. So we have confidentiality, integrity, and availability, or what we call CIA. So we will begin with an overview focusing on how organizations can stay secure. Several different measures that a company can take to improve security will be discussed. We will then follow up by reviewing security precautions that individuals can take to secure their personal computer device. Confidentiality. So when we say confidentiality, when protecting information, we want to be able to restrict access to those who are allowed to see it. Everyone else should be disallowed from learning anything about its contents. This is the essence of confidentiality. So for example, federal law requires that universities restrict access to private student information. The university must be sure that only those who are authorized have access to view the grade records. Next is integrity. So when we say integrity, is the assurance that information being accessed has not been altered and truly represent what is intended. So for example of this would be when a hacker is hired to go into the university system and change grade. Integrity can also be lost unintentionally, such as when a computer power surge corrupts a file or someone authorized to make a change accidentally deletes a file or enters incorrect information. Next is availability. So when we say availability means that information can be accessed and modified by anyone authorized to do so in appropriate time frame. It will depend on the type of information. Appropriate time frame can mean different things. So for example, a stock trader needs information to be available immediately, while a salesperson may be happy to get sales numbers for the day in a report the next morning. Companies such as Amazon will require their servers to be available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Other companies may not suffer if their web servers are down for a few minutes occasionally. Next is our tool for information security. So to ensure the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of information, organization can choose from a variety of tools. So each of these tools can be utilized as a part of overall information security policy, which will be discussed in this topic. Number one is authentication. So the most common way to identify someone is through their physical appearance, but how do we identify someone sitting behind a computer screen or at the ATM. So tools for authentication are used to ensure that the person accessing the information is indeed who they represent themselves to be. So authentication can be accomplished by identifying someone through one or more three factors: something they know, something they have, or something they are. So for example, the most common form of authentication today is the user ID and password. In this case, the authentication done by confirming something the user knows, but this form of authentication is easy to compromise, and stronger forms of authentication are sometimes needed. So identifying someone only by something they have, such as key or a card, can also be problematic. When that identifying token is lost or stolen, that identity can be easily stolen. So the final factor, something you are, is much harder to compromise. This factor identifies a user by a physical characteristic such as eye scan or fingerprint. Identifying someone to their physical characteristics called biometrics. So a more secure way to authenticate a user is to do a multi-factor authentication. Next is access control. So when we say access control determines which users are authorized to read, modify, add, and delete information. For each user, specific capabilities are assigned, such as read, write, delete, or add. Only users with those capabilities are allowed to those functions. If a user is not on the list, they have no ability to even know that the information resource exists. ACLs are simple to understand and maintain. The primary drawback in that each information resource is managed separately. So if a security administrator wanted to add or remove a user to a large set of information resources, it will be quite difficult. So this has led to an improved method of access control, or what we call role-based access control, or RBAC. So with RBAC, instead of giving specific user access rights to an information resource, users are assigned to roles, then roles are assigned the access. So here is the figure of ACL, and then role-based access control and the role assignments of each user. So this allows the administrators to manage users and roles separately, simplifying administration and by extension, improving security. Next is encryption. So encryption is a process of encoding data upon its transmission or storage so that only authorized individuals can read it. So this is encoding accomplished by a computer program which encodes the plain text that needs to be transmitted. Then the recipient receives the ciphertext and decodes it. So that's what we call decryption. So for this to work, the sender and receiver need to agree on the method of encoding so that both parties can communicate properly. So both parties share the encryption key, enabling them to encode and decode each other messages. So this is called symmetric key encryption. So when we say symmetric key encryption, this is a type of encryption is problematic because the key is available in two different places. So here is the figure of public key encryption example. So the sender have the plain text and the public key, and the communication channel going to the recipient or destination. So an alternative symmetric key encryption is a public key encryption. In a public key encryption, two keys are used a public key and a private key. So to send an encrypted message, you obtain the public key, encode the message, and send it. The recipient then use the private key to decode it. This public key can be given to anyone who wishes to send the recipient a message. So each user simply needs one private key and one public key to secure messages. The private key is necessary to decrypt something sent with the public key. Next is password security. So it turns out that this single factor authentication is extremely easy to compromise. So good password policies must be put in place to ensure that password cannot be compromised. So below are some of the more common policies that the organizations should put in place. So number one, we have the required complex password. So one reason passwords are compromised is that they can be easily guessed. A recent study found that the top three password people used in 2012 were password 123456 and then 12345678. So a password should not be simple or a word that can be found in a dictionary. One of the first thing hacker will do is to try to crack a password by testing every term in the dictionary. Instead, a good password policy is one that requires the use of minimum 8 characters and at least one uppercase letter and one special character and one number. Next is change password regularly. So it is essential that users change their password on a regular basis. Users should change their password every 60 to 90 days, ensuring that any password that may have been stolen or guests will not be able to use against the company. Next, for password security, is to train employees not to give away password. So one of the primary methods that is used to steal password is to simply figure them out by asking the users or administrators. Pretexting occurs when attacker calls a help desk or security administrator and pretends to be a particular authorized user. Authorized user having trouble logging in. Then by providing some personal information about the authorized user, the attacker convinces the security person to reset the password and tell him what it is. Another way that employees may be tricked into giving away password is through email phishing. Phishing occurs when a user receives an email that looks as if it is from a trusted source, such as their bank or their employer. In the email, the user is asked to click a link and log in into a website that mimics the genuine website and enters their ID and password, which are then captured by the attacker. Next is backups. So another essential tool for information security is a comprehensive backup plan for the entire organization. Not only should the data on the corporate servers be backed up, but individual computers used throughout the organization should also be backed up. A good backup plan should consist of several components. So these components is what we call a full understanding of the organization information resources. So what information does what does the organization have? Where is it stored? Some data may be stored on the organization servers, other data on users hard drive, some in the cloud, and some on the third party sites. So an organization should make a full inventory of all the information that needs to be backed up and determine the best way to back up. Next is regular backups of all data. The frequency of backup should be based on how important the data is to the company. combined with the ability of the company to replace any data that is lost. Critical data should be backed up daily, while less critical data can be backed up quickly. Next is what we call offsite storage of backup data set. If all the backup data is being stored in the same facility as the original copies of the data, then a single event such as an earthquake, fire, or tornado would take out both the original data and the backup. So it is essential that part of the backup plan is to store the data in an offsite location. Next is test of data restoration. So on a regular basis, the backup should be put to test by having some of the data stored. This will ensure that the process is working and will give the organization confidence in the backup plan. Next is UPS or Universal Power Supply. So universal power supply is a device that provides battery backup to critical components of the system, allowing them to stay online longer or allowing the IT staff to shut down using a proper procedures to prevent the data loss that may occur from a power failure. Next is the alternate of hot sites. So some organizations choose to have an alternate site where an exact replica of their critical data is always kept up to date. So when the primary site goes down, the alternate site is immediately brought online so that little or no downtime is experienced. So as information become a strategic asset, a whole industry has sprung up around the technologies necessary for implementing proper backup strategy. So a company can contract with a service provider to back up all their data or they can purchase a large amounts of online storage space and do it themselves. So technologies such as storage area networks or SNA, SAN, and archival system are now used by most large businesses. Next is firewalls. So firewalls is a hard firewall is a device that is connected to the network and filters the packets based on a set of rules. So a software firewall runs on the operating system and intercepts packets as they arrive to a computer. So a firewall protects all companies' servers and computers by stopping packets from outside the organization's network that do not meet a strict set of criteria. So here is the figure of what we call a firewall. So a firewall may also be configured to restrict the flow of packets leaving the organization. This may be done to eliminate the possibility of employees watching YouTube videos or using Facebook from a company user. Some organizations may choose to implement multiple firewalls as part of their network security configuration, creating or more sections of their network that are partially secured. This segment of the network is referred as a DMC or borrowing the term the demilitarized zone from the military. It is where an organization may place resources that need broader access but need broader access but still need to be secured. Next is intrusion detection systems or IDS. So it is an intrusion detection system or IDS that does not add any additional security. Instead, it provides the functionality to identify if the network is being attacked. So here is the figure also. So an IDS can be configured to watch for specific types of activities, then alert the security personnel if that activity occurs. An ADS also can log various types of traffic on the network for analysis later. So an IDS is essential part of any good security. set up. Next is virtual private network or VPN. So a VPN allows a user who is outside of a corporate network to take a detour around the firewall and access the internal network from the outside. So using firewalls and other security technologies, organization can effectively protect many of their information resources by making them invisible to the outside world. But what if an employee working from home requires access to some of these resources? So what if a consultant is hired who needs to do work on the corporate network from a remote location? So in these cases, virtual private network or VPN is called for or essential in this type of cases. Next is physical security. So it is the protection of the actual hardware and networking components that store and transmit information resources. So an organization can be implement the best authentication scheme in the world and develop the best access control, install firewalls and intrusion prevention, but its security cannot be complete without implementation of physical securities. Next is, so here is the following physical security. Number one is to lock door. It may seem obvious, but all the security in the world is useless if an intruder can simply walk in and physically remove a computing device. Highly valued information assets should be secured in a location with limited access. Next is physical intrusion detection. So high value information asset should be monitored through the use of security cameras and other means to detect unauthorized access to the physical location where they exist. Next is secured equipment. So devices should be locked down to prevent them from being stolen. One of the employees' hard drive could contain all of your customer information, so it is essential that it has to be secured. Next is the environmental monitoring. So an organization's servers and other high-value equipment should always be kept in a room that is monitored for temperature, humidity, and airflow. So the risk of a server failure rises when these factors go out of a specified range. Next is employee training. So one of the most common ways thieves steal corporate information is to steal employee laptops. While employees are traveling, employees should be trained to secure the equipment whenever they are from the office. Next is to have a security policies. So a good information security policies lays out the guidelines for employee to use of the information resources of the company and provides the company resources in the case that an employee violates policy. So a good example of security policy that many will be familiar with is a web use policy. So a web use policy lays out the responsibilities of companies, employees as they use company resources to access the internet. Next is the mobile security. So mobile security, as the use of mobile devices such as smartphones, tablets, organization must be ready to address the unique security concern that the use of these devices bring. Mobile devices can pose many unique security challenges to an organization. Probably one of the biggest concern is theft of intellectual property. So creating BYOD or bring your own device policy allows employees to integrate themselves more fully into their job and can bring higher employee satisfaction in and productivity. Usability. So to secure information resources, organization must balance the need for security with users and need to be effectively access and use these resources. For example, password policies. If the organization requires an extremely long password with several special characters, an employee may resort to writing it down and putting in a drawer since it would be impossible to memorize. So a system security measure make it difficult to use. Then users will find ways around the security which may make the system more vulnerable than it would have been without the security measures. Next is the personal information security. So when we say personal information security, in this discussion, what we measures each of us as individual users can take to secure our computing technologies. There is no way to have 100% security, but there are several simple steps steps we as individuals can take to make ourselves more secure. So number one is we have to keep your software up to date. So whenever a software vendor determines that a security flaw has been found in their in their software, they will release an update to the software that you can download to fix the problem. So turn on automatic updating on your computer to automate this process. Next is to install antivirus software and keep it up to date. So there are many good antivirus software packages on the market today, including free ones. Next is to be smart about your connection. So when connecting to a Wi-Fi network in a public place, be aware that you could be at a risk of being spied by others sharing that network. It is advisable not to access your financial advisable not to access your financial or personal data while attached to a Wi-Fi hotspot. You should also be aware that connecting USB flash drive to your device could also put you at risk. Do not attach an unfamiliar flash drive to your device unless you can scan it first with your security software. So we have so next would be the backup your data. So most of email and social media providers now have two-factor wait, secure backup your data and your secure accounts with two-factor authentication. So most and email and social media providers now have a two-factor authentication option. The way this works is simple. When you log into your account from a familiar computer for the first time, it sends you a text message with a code that you must enter to confirm that you are really you. This means that no one else can log into your accounts without knowing your password and having your mobile phone with them. Then next is our backup your data. So just as organizations need to back up their data, individuals needs to as well. So and the same rules apply. Do it regularly and keep it a copy of it in another location. So one simple solution for this is to set up account with an online backup services such as Cloud, Google Cloud, OneDrive, Mozy, and Carbonite to automate your backups. Next is to make your passwords long and strong and unique. So for your personal password, you should follow the same rules that are recommended for organizations. So your password should be long and contain at least two of the following: uppercase letters, numbers, and special characters. Next is be suspicious of strange links and attachments. So when you read an email, tweet, or Facebook post, be suspicious of any links, attachment included there. Do not click the link directly if you are at all suspicious. Instead, if you want to access the website, find it yourself and navigate to it directly. So here is the summary of my discussion. So as computing and networking resources have become more and more integral part of business, they have also become a target of criminals. So organization must be vigilant with the way they protect their resources. The same holds true for us personally as digital devices become more and more intertwined with our lives, and becomes crucial for us to understand how to protect ourselves. So here is the references that I use for my topic. So thank you and good day, everyone.